on me. Good day or good morning or wherever whatever time you have now in your time zone. Dear colleagues, my name is Roman Shutov and I'm honored to moderate this meeting today for you. Today's event is being brought to you by European Values Think Tank and Tax.org UA, two distinguished think tanks from Czech Republic and Ukraine, and the financial support of European Union provided through Black Sea Trust for Regional Cooperation. And today we have a group of distinguished experts who represent really the flagships in counter and disinformation business in this part of the world. And I'm pleased to announce Mariam Tsitsikashvili from Georgian Reform Associates from Tbilisi, Tam Tautiashvili from National Democratic Institute, Ukrainian office, Giedrius Sakalauskas, Lithuanian Elves, Petro Bodnar from Tax.org, and Adam Sibera will be speaking on behalf of European Values Think Tank. We expect that the debate will take 1 hour. It is being broadcast through Facebook and YouTube. During this 1 hour time, please use comments options to ask any questions, and I will do my best to deliver them to our speakers. So today's meeting is dedicated to the issue of contribution that civil society makes to countering disinformation. In our audience, there may be different opinions. Some of you may be optimistic, saying that civil society is active and effective. Others may argue that CSOs' resources are always limited and their impact is still to be proven. Others may even cry, hey, disinformation is a matter of security, and that's why this is state and state only that who should deal with it. So today, let's dive deeper into approach and strategies applied by the civil society across Europe and check out whether they bring change. So, Georgian Research Associates, or simply GRASS, a seasoned team of researchers, analysts, and fact-checkers, fact-checking, analysis, policy papers, campaigns. Mariam, you tried pretty everything. What do you think? What did work best? What did brought best value for your country and the society? The floor is yours. Please, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Roman, and I'm really pleased to join this excellent pool of experts today. And I'll be glad if our insights would be useful for many organizations who start now their work against disinformation, or just citizens who are interested in learning how we work and whether our work is efficient, impactful, and so on. But to begin with, of course, this would be a disclaimer from my side. Of course, impact is indeed very important and perhaps the crucial issue, and measuring how our responses or strategies affect overall information integrity, or whether our activities and actions contribute to public resilience building or not, is a very important question to ask ourselves. But at the same time, we shall not definitely embroil into a discussion where we discuss metrics and measurements, and meanwhile our adversaries continue their attacks, by the way, without measuring how their actions impact on different societies. But of course, measuring impact and looking at the results of our work has always been a crucial part of our work. So to start with Georgia's and perhaps with GRASS's experience, yes, you are right, Roman. We pretty much do everything, but I would like to now bring your attention to the fact-checking program that we have, and then later on, if I have also time, I'll talk a bit about political advocacy that we've been doing. So to start with the fact-checking program that we have, we've been doing this for 8 years already now. And this is, in fact-checking, not only in Georgia, but elsewhere. This is essential component in the fight against disinformation, but not enough, of course. Before we joined Facebook's third-party fact-checking program, we were pretty much limited in accessing and outreaching those communities who were especially vulnerable to disinformation. Let's take Facebook and those echo chambers in which users share disinformation and believe in this disinformation. It was always hard for us to reach out those people. Now we joined this program, and Facebook gives us some strong instruments to have much bigger impact, which means that we are now able to outreach those communities, to tell those communities that they are sharing, for example, this information, and then for repeated offenders who do it intentionally and on repeated manner, to punish them in a way, because Facebook sanctions them in a way that their overall distribution, for example, reduces. Now the question is, still a fact checking, and this instrument also is a reactive approach and reactive measure. So the people who see our labels, who are punished on Facebook, do they come on our side? Do they believe that they were offenders and they abused Facebook rules and they shared misinformation? Of course, not everybody. Everybody believes in our fact checks. Not everybody believes in our verdicts. But overall statistics tell us that, for example, 90% of Facebook users do not click those links where there is a label that says that, according to fact checkers, this is a false news. Of course, this program does not mean that, oh, we are on the safe side already and we have defeated disinformation. Not at all. But this is just a small piece of in the fight against disinformation. Why I've talked about this? Because this experience has showed us and has attested that that buzzword that is called whole of society approach is really working. Unless there are synergies between different sectors, unless there is a multi-stakeholder approach, the results of our work are much limited. When we started this partnership with Facebook, as I said, we have seen quite an increased impact of our work, which was not the case before we were fact checking, even though the quality of our work would be same before joining the program and after the joining the program. A second very important issue is, of course, related to the partnership and cooperation or coordination with the state institutions. What you were saying, Roman, in your introductory remarks, I agree on all of the statements that you made. Yes, so disinformation is a security threat, therefore you need state on board. Yes, our resources are limited, that's also true. And that is why this whole of society approach and intersectoral cooperation is the only solution or only efficient response that, according to our experience, we can talk about. But unfortunately, when it comes to Georgia and Georgia's experience or Grass's experience in terms of cooperating with the state, this part perhaps is the weakest part of the Georgian response against disinformation and hybrid threats overall. But this is not only a result that there could be some deficiencies or some problems on the side of civil society, but of course there is a big issue on what state institutions itself are doing, whether we have strong democratic institutions or not. The situation in which Georgia finds itself, of course, makes its capacity to counter disinformation and other types of hybrid threats very weak, because we have weak institutions, because we see democratic backsliding in Georgia over the past few years. So it, of course, affects its fight against disinformation also. Grass's experience also shows that certain advocacy with the and strong advocacy with the state institutions could bring some results, and this was attested again by the fact that for over 2 years, Grass was working with the parliament, or the better word or fair word would be was pushing the government and the parliament first in the first case, they to come up with the proper policy responses against disinformation. What we ended up with was a report that was finalized by the Parliament of Georgia that includes some recommendations how they should work, how they should perform oversight on the government of Georgia. The report is quite good. If you read, you will think that, oh, the Georgian Parliament is way ahead to many of the European parliaments because they have drafted a report a guideline how they should work against disinformation. But unfortunately, this report is on the shelf right now, and nobody has started. Not even, I'm not talking about implementation, but I'm talking about even discussion about this report. So if you then assess whether our work and our advocacy was successful, of course, output wise, it was successful because we got a report. But if we try to assess its impact, whether in reality there has been made any relevant steps from the state's side against this information, no, we were not successful. But I'm not going to say that this was because we were not efficient. Definitely not. Because the democratic backsliding that has been happening in Georgia and high polarization that is happening in Georgia is making it almost impossible to engage in a constructive discussion and dialogue with different stakeholders. However, nevertheless, even though we are finding ourselves in these difficult times, of course, there is no alternative than, again, striving for making partners and friends in business, in parliament, in government, and finding these synergies in order to scale up our efforts, and of course in scaling up the quality and the impact of our work. So this would be from my side at this point, and I'll be glad to answer your questions, Roman, as well as the questions that could come from the audience.
Thank you, Mariam. So I think that the key message from your side to the civil society may be that cooperation with the government and with non-governmental stakeholders may be one of the keys to success. And even if you exist under non-friendly political environment, even when your government is closed and there is no room for cooperation, you always can search for synergy with businesses, with media, or among you yourselves, civil society organizations. And here I go to another speaker on our panel, because everything that relates to cooperation between civil society organizations is always tricky. Here and there in different countries, we see quite a good number of quite talented organizations fighting disinformation. But when it comes to networking, to cooperation, as a rule, all the attempts fail. Not all, but always majority. But we have one case that is quite successful, and this is in Ukraine. And this is the Disinfo Coordination Hub that NDI has been running for almost 2 years. So for Ukrainian reality, believe me, this is unbelievable situation. Tamta, please share the secret. How did you manage to keep these organizations together for such a long period?
Thank you, Roman. Just a second, I'll try to share my screen. Apologies to everyone for the delay. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Great. First of all, I'll start with greetings to everyone who's watching and listening in from different countries. And thanks a lot to the organizers for putting this together. It is truly my pleasure to talk about disinformation in Ukraine and the civil society's role in fighting against it. Before we discuss civil society for a second, for those who are plugging in from other countries that might not know the context that well, just very briefly, Ukraine is truly a ground zero for Russia's disinformation attacks. These attacks are coming from everywhere, all types of sources, and on all kinds of topics. You name a topic, there is Russian disinformation in Ukraine. Since 2014, we've also been seeing much wider targeting of a population as a whole, not just certain segments of the population that we were seeing before 2014. So this is truly a very, very critical country. In this context, civil society organizations, while they're not the only actors, of course, in this fight, but definitely they have been at the forefront of this fight against disinformation. We see new projects, initiatives, ideas all the time. There is this ever developing community that is trying to find new ways to combat disinformation. And the aspects of the engagement, again, while there is all sorts of disinformation in Ukraine, also there is all sorts of initiatives coming from civil society organizations to try to fact check or debunk or track and monitor. And Texti will be going into the details of monitoring, so I won't bother you with that. They're much better experts than I am. There are media literacy campaigns promoting reforms on Western, pro-European initiatives, journalistic standards, wide range of content production. And I must say the impact conversation was very interesting, and we can go into the details during the Q&A session as well. But the results are bearing fruit. Of course, it's very difficult to ping the impact on a single organization or on a single actor even. But looking at the recent changes in public opinion, there is clear that awareness on disinformation is increasing amongst Ukrainians. The quality of conversation in qualitative research is significantly different now and covers more details of what, how, and why than we saw it a few years back. So the real changes are very apparent to everyone. Though, while this is the context, I wanted, as Roman mentioned, to talk about the value of collaboration and coordination. Earlier, you started, Roman, in your opening statement as CSOs have limited resources. And indeed, there are limited resources, both financial and human. Producing disinformation is cheap. Combating is more expensive. Today, I want to talk about the Disinformation Coordination Hub that we initiated back in 2019, end of 2019. NDI wanted to create a platform for civil society organizations through counter disinformation champions in Ukraine to have the platform to exchange thoughts. We all gather at different events and conferences to talk about success, but very rarely we discuss lessons learned and how we can approach challenges not to happen again. So this was a platform that was in an attempt to create the safe space for CSOs to discuss what works, what doesn't work, and how we can move forward. From the very outset of this initiative, in the conversations, civil society organizations started to think of collaborative actions. At first, it was more in a more disorganized manner, right? We talk about a challenge, then we all agree, let's concentrate on something. Later, this collaboration shaped into a much more organized initiatives, and what you see now is one of the examples that just recently was published by on behalf of Disinformation Coordination Hub. This combines information monitoring and analysis of 11 different organizations, and more importantly, it covers combined recommendations to all the actors, including in the government, parliament, media, other civil society organizations. There are other collaboration examples also on the awareness raising activity side. Ukraine Explained, for example, is yet another collaborative project of Ukrainian CSOs that came together to try to proactively counter disinformation that attacks Ukraine's history, art, and culture. 5 different CSOs have issued, from long reads to analytic articles to videos and images, to try to reclaim Ukraine's history and culture. And we saw some tangible, actual results in the real world that influence decision makers, key decision makers in respective spheres. In short, I guess what I'm saying is, while working on their respective areas of countering disinformation, Ukrainian CSOs are also moving forward to greater collaboration and coordination. And the goal is to create one voice, basically, from civil society to maximize their impact. I know that the time is limited, and I'm happy to discuss more during the discussion, but wanted to spend a few seconds to talk about what are the next steps. What are we discussing right now with our partner CSOs in the Disinformation Coordination Hub to move forward? There are two ways, two parallel streams, rather. One is partnership developments, where already established strong CSOs are working with other more different topic related civil society organizations, working with media, engaging more non-orthodox groups like bloggers and influencers to reach even greater number of vulnerable groups and make bigger impact and amplify each other's voices. And the other track is institutional changes. The recommendations in the hub report that was recently published is very detailed. So every actor invested in making a change can take away a lot from those recommendations. So the key is now to organize civil society actors to advocate for these changes, for strategies, legislative frameworks, and in general, greater information integrity. I will end here and answer any questions that you might have to go deeper to any aspect that I mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tamta. It was super insightful. I have lots of questions, but I think that our audience should ask the questions first. So, if I understand correctly, networking, if being established properly, leads not only to scaling up impact of each particular organizations, but also contributes to one voice position between the civil society, among the civil society, that makes the collective impact much bigger. That's a great message. And another very important thing that you mentioned was that this, in its turn, this leads to institutional change within the organizations themselves. That's amazing. That for myself, from my point of view, it's a real magic. Thank you, Tamtam. Nobody saw their faces, but they exist. Army of Elves is hiding in the bush, hunting for trolls and other digital beasts. Gedrius, some people say that some civil society organizations limit themselves within their bubbles. They rarely go to ordinary people, exposing disinformation, propaganda to them. I know that this army of elves that stands behind you is doing exactly like this. Could you please share some stories from this war, and how do you feel? Do you achieve any victories in this war?
The first rule of the elves that they are not exist. That's why I'm not an elf. I just know a bit about them. I can tell you the fairy tale about elves. They appeared 2014 when Russia invaded Ukraine. It was time to do something touchable, and a small group of the like-minded friends, they started to do something. And now it's like, as you said, it's quite big army of the elves. At least in Lithuania, we have about 4,000 of them. And this is not organization. It's real grassroots movement without fixed membership, without any code. I've just mentioned one rule that they do not exist, and that's it. And I think that is a success story. How civil society is able to combat disinformation and hostile propaganda. And another aspect, why is success story? Because the elves, they are not alone. They really combating disinformation together with the state organization or state bodies, together with academia, and that's why Lithuania is really perfect perfectly working country combating the disinformation. What else? Maybe I'm ready to answers because I do not like to make monologues. I'm ready to tell to answer the questions. I
I
think that
think,
is, yes.
yeah, may I continue this conversation, because I think that all the audience is interested. Okay, so we have this army of elves. Are there any cases for you to share when they coordinated activity led to some tangible result, to some change, to some loud effect? When we can say that this army received at least small but victory.
I can tell you one of the latest. I can tell you about one of the latest campaigns what the elves did, and not only. Let me tell you that that is not only Lithuania. We have Elves United. We have Elves chapters at least in 12 countries, and one of the latest campaigns was initiated by Ukrainian elves, and the case was Danone. Yeah, probably everyone knows Danone, the big international French company, milk company, and they started advertising with a Russian actor Poroshenkov, and of course you know that that bastard was shooting at the defenders of the Donetsk airport, and you can still you can find it on the YouTube where he's shooting to the defenders of the airport, and somehow Danone take him to advertise Actimel, mainly for the kids. And what we did, what else did? We went to the Danone Facebook page, asking them to stop this, putting memes with the hashtag Bloody Danone, and in 2 days, uh, I think it was Ukrainian ambassador for the France. He put it on the Twitter that he was contacted by the vice president of Danone, saying that they are stopping this campaign, and it was done just by the simple people. Any penny was spent on this, just creativity and civic position. That's it.
Great.
That is case how we can measure our success. We're doing something and we're having results. That's it.
Great. It really looks like a cool story. This is a victory. Thank you, Gedrius. Now we have already some questions from our audience. I'm happy to see them. But before we jump to the session, let me pass the floor to Petro Bodnar, who represents Texty or VA from Ukraine. Texty is one of the strongest organizations in Ukraine doing monitoring of social media, of traditional media, and doing campaigns targeting the audiences and exposing disinformation and propaganda. Petro, please, 5 minutes.
Hello. Thank you very much for such fine words, and thank you, Tamta. We very appreciate it. And I'm really glad to have the opportunity to speak about our work. As Roman said, we have spent quite a while in misinformation and disinformation studying business. I guess we started with it 3 or 4 years ago. And our main focus is to combine the efforts of civil society, of different groups of journalists, analysts, academia people, and civil servants with the powers acquired from modern technology and from variety tools, these days mainly centered around text processing algorithms. However, we are always expanding our toolbox, and I hope we would soon be able to show some brand new results. So, what do we do, and why do we think it matters? Our primary focus is the collection and the analysis of the news articles and to some extent social media posts containing Russian disinformation mainly. I think at this point we collected around 15 million articles and posts in our database, and it's constantly growing. We are monitoring hundreds of websites of messenger channels, etc. And what do we do with all of this bunch of information? We extract those specific messages that contain this information, and we group them into specific narratives. And we, thanks to this ability, we are able to tell the story about how those narratives emerged, how they developed in time, what specific arguments they used, whom often transferred those points, and how those points were weaponized in the real world. For example, one of the latest examples, this spring, Russia started huge military tension on the eastern border of Ukraine, bringing a huge part of its own military to the Ukrainian border and doing some kind of Moscow flushing. And what we and our analysts noticed is that just before the military tension started rising, there was a huge uprising in the messages discussing how Ukraine is allegedly going to attack Russia or attack pro-Russian pro-Russian fighters in the occupied territories of Ukraine. So we were able to distinguish this specific narrative and to show how Russia used its informational capabilities, informational warfare capabilities, in order to strengthen its like plain and ordinary military capabilities. We were also working a lot with the topics of vaccination, of COVID-based disinformation, and one of the works me and my colleagues are very proud of is that we've showed how via different channels Russia promoted its own vaccines by sharing false and often harmful claims about the different Western vaccines, by claiming they're inefficient and often dangerous, and by ever increasing the anti-vaccine sentiment among some groups of population in Ukraine, and I guess in other countries too. And as a final message, I'd like to say that when we started as a data journalism kind of project, and we've developed and evolved a lot from this time. And at some point we understood that cooperation with state bodies is essential. So the last year we were doing a big project coordinating with Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, helping them to build their own capabilities in monitoring, targeting, and answering to informational threats from disinformation. I think that was all of my 5 minutes, so I'll stop here and I would be glad to answer your questions.
Thank you, Petro. So, as far as I can feel, our key message to the civil society organizations here is that whatever data you produce, whatever knowledge you produce, there must be somebody sitting opposite to you at the table, ready to take your knowledge and data and convert it into action. If there is an opportunity to work with the government, go and work with the government. If there is no opportunity of working with the government, search for different stakeholders who need data like this. If nobody needs this data, so that's a question, why do you produce this data? So probably one of the key tasks for the think tanks, for researchers, is establishing proper contact with the government or other governmental stakeholders so that the data is converted into action. Thank you, Petro. And also, certainly, we have a speaker from European Values think tank. For those who don't know what is European Values, this is probably one of the strongest and most influential think tanks in the Central Europe and probably in the Europe as a whole, who produce lots of research, who produce many policy papers, reports, and they do have a very good contact with governments across Europe and help them adopting proper decisions in countering disinformation. So, Adam, you tried pretty everything. Monitoring, campaigning, debunking, policy papers, policy briefing. from your perspective, what did work best?
Well, first, thank you for the kind words on, I think, behalf of everyone in the European values. We appreciate them a lot. Also, thank you for the invitation to join this panel. You guys are wonderful speakers, and I'm very proud I can be here with you. So, what do I think works best? Okay, so that was a lot of information. So I'll try to debunk it a bit. I work as an analyst in the Kremlin Watch program. So I'm in the part where we collect data. I don't do everything, so I can't really say about the other aspects. But from my point of view, or personally, I consider news or things you see on TV as not news, but something that someone is telling you what it either happened or will happen. And if you want to understand this, you need to understand who the someone is. And the role of civil societies, in my eyes, are discovering who that someone is, what context he is presenting or she, and with what intention. And from our, let's say, our latest project, or yeah, you guys basically said everything, so I will just give you a straight example. We've launched an atlas of influence lately because the general election in Czech Republic is coming up, which was supposed to work as sort of a, I don't have a better term, so I'll just say it, like a shit list of collaborators. And it was meant to bring attention to people who spread Russian or Chinese influence within Czech Republic and are about to join the parliament. And we wanted to present the public a sort of encyclopedia where they can navigate with what politician represents not which side, but through what they have done or statements they've made or how they've voted in the past, what influence they really represent. So the intention was sort of to name and shame. However, the impact or the first feedback we had was from politicians who were mentioned. I should mention first that in the atlas, if we were evaluated as a negative influence for Czech Republic or a positive influence for Kremlin or China, you were marked as either red for China, blue for Russia, or green, someone who's specifically fighting against it or made some incentive to combat the disruptive influence. And as I said before, it was meant to work as a name and shame kind of method, but the impact was that many politicians who were there as neutral and in reality are against are fighting against the disruptive influence started providing us with their own personal data, so we show them as a positive impact. They sort of wanted to, flex before their electorate that they're fighting it. So incidentally, we created a tool of motivation, of positive motivation for the politicians to actually provide the public with more information of how they stand against. So they're presented as someone who's not collaborating. So that's an example of an impact, and I think a prime one actually, because it's something that began as pure research and pure open source sharing of information, and ended up actually motivating certain policymakers to behave in a certain way. So I think that is my example of an impact and how what motivates me to work in a civil society.
Cool, thank you, Adam. I like this story about the positive stimulus for the policymakers, and I think we should one day arrange this another discussion to find some more positive solutions, how to help media to disseminate disinformation less often than they do now, how to stimulate policymakers to be more, so to say, attentive to disinformation threats and considering them in their practice, and so on. And even when we speak about the policy solutions to counter disinformation, currently they're mostly of restrictive nature rather than positive. But I think that will be a topic for another debate. Now we have some questions from the audience. Let me remind you, dear listeners and viewers, that we have the options of questions, so please use it, and we will find some answers for you. And we have a question that basically I had in mind, and I was sure that if nobody asked it, I would ask it. But we have a listener who asked this thing instead of me. Tamta, the question's for you. What would be your advice for CSOs working on countering disinformation to avoid preaching to the core of the niche audiences and amplify their message to a wider audience of general population and vulnerable groups? Thank you.
Thank you, Roman, for voicing out, and thank you, Maya, for asking that question. That is a very important topic, and I think it's two things. First is identifying who are the vulnerable groups, and make sure to target them. But what we've seen also, we do a lot of work on identifying vulnerable groups in Ukraine with our civil society partners as well through public opinion research. What we learned very soon was that just demographic targeting is not the only way to go. We need to understand these groups better. Who are they? What are their attitudes on important value-based or otherwise questions? What are their opinions on ongoing events? What are their media habits? So really a comprehensive understanding of a vulnerable group. That's less of a half job done. The hardest part is then figure out how to reach them. And here I think, again, I do truly believe that in the limited resources, no one organization single-handedly can probably reach millions and millions of Ukrainians throughout the country. And this is, again, the message that I wanted to voice out today, the collaboration, amplifying somehow each other's voices, seeking partnerships where it's clear that there can be partnerships. For example, the government that is striving to combat disinformation and CSOs, but also partnerships that are more unorthodox and creative. In Ukraine, everything is done through bloggers and Instagram and influencers on art and culture and bringing in news. So really trying to figure out how you can expand the group of fighters in a way where civil society organizations can give the content, but the messengers can be the ones that are more out there with general public on everyday basis on a local level or even on a national level. So that's where I see the ways to not preach to the choir, but rather reach to the real vulnerable groups.
Thank you. Probably some of the experts also want to answer. Fine. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Tamta. And let's jump to another question. Andres from Latvia asks, have you involved the diaspora in the West in the fight against disinformation? The West. I don't know if this question is if this question is for Gedrius or for, but I think that it's quite relevant to all the cases and all the speakers. Gedrius, please.
Hey? For Elves is no diaspora because we are online. We all diaspora and we are all local. Of course, we're evolving.
Any other answers? Okay, thank you. If I may, I have a question from my side. How do you in your organizations, how do you measure your success? How do you measure your impact? What do you have in the center of your theory of change? I mean, imagine that you say that, yeah, this project was impactful, this project was effective. What exactly should be there to prove that the impact, that the change is there? I don't know. Adam, please go first.
I can start because it's something I want to EVC we want to as a whole or something that happened which we are very proud of is the Russia's foreign policy within nuclear energy around Central Europe, Hungary, and Western Balkans is essentially the same. It is to build a over-dimensioned project which will entrap the state budget for 35 years, and it's the potential for corruption in these development projects is incredible. You can give the tender to a company that you own, and you can create contracts, which the Czech Republic was trying to do, that the loan would be state organized, and until the development is finished, there is 0% coming back to the state, which provides incentive to never finish the project. So you would just have an endless construction of a nuclear power plant, which is sort of happening with Hungary and Factchecking. So based on the situation in Hungary, we have analyzed and evaluated that something similar is trying to happen in Czech Republic. And we've been systematically creating pressure on policymakers that Lex Dukovany, or Dukovany, which was the power plant that was meant to be finished, is the biggest theft in bright daylight that is happening right now. And finally, after maybe 2 years of hard effort, the president finally signed, and our president is very pro-Russian, unfortunately, but the pressure was so immense that he signed a document that de facto forbids any companies from China and Russia to participate in the tender. So that's a great measurement of success.
Great. So we have the evidence that there is a policy there proving that your activity finally led to some result, to achieve, to desired effect. Great. Yeah, you have quite pro-Russian president, but you quite, so to say, friendly government. Mariam, I think that in Georgian case, the situation is a bit more complicated. Could you tell us just in a couple of words, can you find room for cooperation with your government? And the question is still the same. How do you measure your support? Your success, your impact?
Yeah, perhaps I will answer the second question by by answering the first one also. So when we talk about advocacy with the government and advocacy with the parliament, our objective, of course, or desired result would have been if the parliament or the government of Georgia would have stepped in with real actions against disinformation. And as I said, when we talk about the parliament's actions, they have initiated this process of inquiry on disinformation. And as I said earlier, if you really go to the European examples and European parliaments, you would not find many countries who've done that. And formalistically speaking, yeah, we are one step ahead in this situation. When it comes to real steps, real actions, what the parliament then did on its own, with its own document, with the document that they adopted in their committee sessions, yeah, they have not done anything. So if with this example we'll try to assess our impact, of course we've been impactful in the case in this case because we managed somehow the parliament to go through this process and to end up with a relevant report that would that now includes quite concrete recommendations of what the government and what the parliament should do. But when it comes to real
Mariam?
do you hear me?
You're back. Yeah.
Oh.
Mariam, please come back to us.
Do you hear me now?
Mariam, yes. Yes, please continue.
So I was saying that, output-wise, of course, we have some results, and one of the objectives of ours was the parliament to be engaged in this process, and this engagement was achieved. The process was, of course, delayed, was not constructive. Our cooperation with the parliament and its members was not an easy one. But we ended up with this report. However, as I said, since its implementation is entirely frozen and no real actions were taken by the MPs or by the ruling party, of course, first and foremost, we cannot say that we were that successful. Depending on what you put as part of your objective, of course, you can say that you've been impactful. But overall, I think this is the process, and civil society organizations and their efforts, be it in advocacy or be it in fact-checking or whatever, it's constant strive and constant work for your desired goal to somehow reduce the effects of disinformation and increase public resilience. And of course, this does not happen in one night, and be it the advocacy or any other action against disinformation needs constant effort, routine effort, and routine communication with different stakeholders. And that's what GRAS and many other organizations, including in Georgia, are trying to do.
Thank you, Mariam. I think I have one question that may be rather difficult to answer, but still it is very important to discuss. This is more or less obvious that when we issue policy papers, advocacy, we can have some, some political decisions or some policies that we can say, yeah, this happened due to our effort. But when it comes to campaigning, when it comes to awareness raising, to training, to exposing disinformation propaganda to audiences, are there any tools for us to check to check the progress and if we have any success in this? I don't know if any of you has some answer. Tamta, probably you have some.
I can talk about more broadly. Thank you, Roman. I think obviously every organization, as Mariam earlier mentioned as well, sets out the impact assessment. But the ultimate goal of all of us is probably to change the opinions and attitudes of people who are being the victims of disinformation. Again, what I mentioned earlier, there in Ukraine, we are seeing year after year a lot more understanding of people in terms of not just the fact that there is disinformation, also who is responsible for spreading disinformation and why. Most importantly, that was always back in the 2017, I think, when NDI ran its first public opinion survey on disinformation. Our recommendation to our partners was people need to understand how individual disinformation narratives connect to the larger goal, because this linkage is not there in public perceptions. Fast forward 3 years later, and the quality of conversation has been completely changed into we are hearing now more and more from different groups exactly what's in Russia's interest, why is Russia spreading disinformation. There was no mention in our 35 focus groups that we did in 2018, there was no mention of bots or trolls or algorithmic targeting. Again, fast forward 2021, people are discussing how this works. So if that is not a demonstration of success and encouragement to do even more, I don't know what else could be. Individual projects, success stories obviously are always there, but the most important thing is, I think, to know that it is actually bearing fruit into larger public opinion.
Thank you. Any other ideas?
Okay, Kadris.
Gedros, please, and then okay.
So sorry, it's just one example. You asked me about campaigns. It's not exactly the campaign or what you meant, but sometime a couple years ago, the Elves realized that the Walmart selling a lot of stuff with the Soviet symbols. It's red T-shirts with the red stars, with the sickles and hammers. And it was, and we started campaign with a hashtag, why not swastika? It means if you're selling with a red star, why not to sell with a swastika? And that campaign was okay. It was not easy. It took 2 months, and some members of European Parliament joined this campaign, asking Walmart why they are doing. And after 2 months, Walmart officially informed they are stopping to sell on the e-commerce platform all that Soviet type stuff. That sounds quite okay.
Cool. Sounds really cool. Petro?
Yeah, I'll try to build on the top was what was Tanta saying. I was thinking about the question a lot, and the thing is that measuring impact on the public opinion is a very complicated task. Well, not itself, because it requires extensive polling and the comparison of the polling and tracking dynamics of the polling. So I think I wouldn't be able to talk about this component, but what I see specifically is that the official position of Ukrainian state is changing on the disinformation. We saw emergence of 2 disinformation countering centers. We saw some legal actions that limited TV channels and news websites that were commonly spreading Russian misinformation and disinformation. I would be happy to attribute it to our activity only, but obviously that's success of the entire civil society in Ukraine, of variety of organizations and actors. So I think it's very complicated to distinct specific part which one specific organization did. However, from the activity of Ukrainian state, we can see that entire pressure from civil society helped to direct the future policy on its information and misinformation.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll add a more pessimistic view on this, with the example of COVID-19 vaccines related disinformation that we are seeing not only in my country, but everywhere in the world. If we try to assess our efficiency in this regard, whether civil society or even state actors have been able to somehow defeat these disinformation waves coming from anti-vaxxers, Russians, and many other malign actors, yeah, we have not been successful. In the case of Georgia, for example, GRASP and many other organizations have been, of course, doing fact-checking work. We've been labeling misinformation on Facebook. Media outlets have been doing quite much for promoting vaccination process. We also have influencer doctors who are on TV channels every day calling on for the citizen state to get vaccinated, but the results are still very, very small, because only 20% of Georgians are vaccinated, for example, right now. And again, with this example, I wanted to draw your attention that unless the state is on board, unless you have proper strategic communication from the state, and unless the efforts of state and non-state actors are united, the results would be always much less than desired by either civil society or the state actors. And currently we are in a situation when, even though business is doing something for promoting vaccination, fact checkers are fighting against misinformation and promoting vaccination. And in some of the streets of Tbilisi, you may find some billboards calling on citizens to vaccinate. But these small efforts, unless are united, we won't get the desired results that we want. And that we write in our initial project proposals or strategy documents that governments are drafting each and every year.
I would suggest just another round of comments from your side. I think this is the time to reassess what we do, what we have done, and come up with some recommendations to civil society organizations. What should they do, or what should they not do, so that to scale up the impact and achieve the change. Now let me start with Adam. Just 2 sentences, just 30 seconds.
Yeah, 2 things what civil societies should do to be successful. We'll continue the good fight, obviously. Don't switch sides. I think Mariam was saying it on the beginning. The fact checking within methodology is crucial, because once you give up on facts and the truth, you open doors to what I can't figure out, tyranny, opposite of freedom. You stop being free, because you lose the compass that helps you navigate within all the events that are happening, within the correct decisions, which are sometimes, well, what is correct, but or the decision that should not malin decision, that the decision you want to make with a good, what do you call it? Good mens rea from legal lingo, like good intent. That's it.
Thank you, Adam. Petro, what do you think? What should the organizations do or do not so that to scale up the impact?
Well, that's a complicated question. Okay, I think I have 2 ideas. First one is try new stuff all the time, not stick to the old tricks, try new things, and eventually they will evolve into powerful tools. And the second point, I guess it would be a little bit more complicated, try to build alliances and to find those parties, those groups that support your points. Maybe they don't support them wholly, but you can build constructive relationships, and you can get outside of the very narrow, well-educated, big city living part of the society, and get much deeper inside of it.
Thank you. Quite interesting. Gedrus, what do you think?
I'm quite often asked about what to do, and my answer is always the same and pretty simple. My advice is move your ass. Everything what you are doing is better than nothing, and 0 is always 0. If you're doing something, you can reach result. Sometimes small results, sometimes big result. Just move your ass.
Cool. Super brief and super informative. Mariam, what are your thoughts?
Very difficult to add, more important thing that Yudrus was talking about, but still I'll try to give a very concrete recommendation to my colleagues. The first thing, do not do unnecessary competition with your colleagues and friends, and seek partnerships and alliances, as it was said earlier. That's the key to success.
I might add one last thing from my side, which I forget, and never give up on Generation Z and X and on the young ones, because they don't reach chain emails, and they're gonna be the future of every electorate, and are the potential for change.
Thank you, Adam. Tom.
Yes, very briefly, because most things were mentioned already. Just to be slightly pessimistic as well. There are groups, of course, while we are talking about changes and successes, there are significant challenges in Ukraine that civil society and other actors, government actors also facing. Some groups are pretty substantial in size, that still either we are not reaching them or our interventions are not cutting through. Both are a problem. So figuring out how to target those groups or how to reach larger groups, I think should be the main goal now moving forward, as well as building partnerships and reaching out to government and other actors who are interested in it. Obviously, was already mentioned.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I think we have some more minutes. If you have anything that you have in your mind, but you didn't have enough time, opportunity to sound, but something that you would like to deliver to the audiences, please use this opportunity. Fabulous. So now let me briefly outline what we have. From this brief, but very, for me, informative discussion, we outlined the key areas where civil society can apparently achieve the change. Civil society, especially acting together, civil society can lead to the policy change. And this is something that we can check, that we can see, and something where we can see the clear connection between our action and the impact. Also, although it is rather difficult to measure, but this is possible, as Tampa says, and we all agree, is that we can achieve the shifts, the change in the public opinion. Yes, this requires the more sophisticated approach. Yes, this requires understanding of the audiences. And here we have a problem that this is not always that we have the data, that we know the audience enough and we understand how we should communicate to these audiences in the most effective way. But if we want to achieve the change in public opinion, if we want to achieve change in public behavior in media, we should know audiences and we should search for such a knowledge. And also mentioned that this is probably easier to cooperate with stakeholders, with governmental stakeholders in some countries where the government is more open for cooperation. But there are countries, there are situations when there is such a cooperation is limited. However, the civil society are searching for opportunities to work together with tech companies, with businesses, with media, and between themselves. And here we discuss the networking issue and all the challenges that connected with networking, because this is difficult, this is costly, but this leads us to the stronger position. This amplifies the sound of the voice of civil society and scales up the impact. Still, this very brief debate opens the avenue for much broader spectrum of questions. How we can get the knowledge about our audiences? How can we shape the cooperation with the government so that this cooperation is really mutually beneficial? How can we communicate our findings to different stakeholders and to different audiences? How and where we can find resources to achieve institutional change needed to produce a high-quality product, to communicate properly to the audiences, and to measure our success. And I think that this sounds like a good agenda for the further meetings. And here, let me thank you, dear colleagues, dear speakers, for all your insights and thoughts today. Thank you, our listeners and viewers, for being with us today. And Texte.org.ua and European Values for hosting this event, and the donor European Union and Black Sea Trust for regional cooperation. Thank you and enjoy your day.
Thank you.